Well, hello. I'm just about to get onto the Monash Freeway to head back towards the city, and I thought it might be a good opportunity to show the capabilities of Autopilot on what is a pretty standard trip. To be honest with you, I'd say that if I'm actually, going to the airport, or I'm going down to the country, or wherever it might be, 90% of that time I'm going to be in Autopilot. It's really fantastic for that. It's even good for roads like this. Like if I pop it in here, you'll see we've got a car merging from the left here, and this definitely isn't what it's meant for, but we'll see what happens here. Yeah, it doesn't worry about it, sees in there and just keeps coming. Tracks nicely to this right hand side lane here, and really just pops us along. So yeah, I think while we're traveling along for the next little bit, I want to have a chat about sort of some of the improvements to Autopilot that's happened over the last little while. Also, some of the rumours from a few of the forums that we've been hearing about the potential rollout within Australia. And then I think also I want to have a chat about just some of the things I've been noticing with Autopilot, because, even though full self-driving isn't available in Australia, I think they're definitely making some changes and some updates to what's, the underlying software. And there's been some evidence in that in files and things, but also just the way the car drives and handles is obviously very, very different. We're just got a car pulling out here, so we'll stop here. FSD did see, Autopilot did see that, but I think just for abundance of caution, we'll take over and do that ourselves as we just head down near towards the Monash. So yeah, I would say, like I said, if I am on highway driving, I am using Autopilot 90% of the time. And I find it actually pretty staggering, and we'll drop it back on here, pretty staggering actually how refreshed you really wake up when you get to your destination, rather than having to sort of sit there and be 100% concentrated. Like on those those long winding roads, I haven't had really one incident. Probably when I first got the car a year ago, there were actually a couple of incidents where it may have a bit of phantom braking, but I haven't had a phantom braking incident in a long, long time. And you see, as I was going through there, and this is a good example now of how it'll stop. So it is still quite a harsh stop, if you see, if you look at the go down there. So it's definitely not perfect, but it does stop quite nicely. And then we'll actually roll on a little bit. And then the acceleration here is actually going to be, I think, too intense. But look, it's not too bad, and it's definitely got a lot better. And it's not really meant for these sort of surface roads. It's definitely meant for the highways, which is where it really, really excels. But I think, here's a good example of a situation we'd had a lot of trouble with a year ago. We're sort of where these lines are divided, and I have to take over now. But going through intersections, maybe where it lost, because, I don't know exactly what's happening, but it's definitely looking for those two lanes and then heading in between them. But, it's done a lot better recently of when it's lost those lines, finding, another middle section, or just really just going straight, I think might be some of its new behavior, rather than trying to hunt around for a different lane. So we're about to jump now down onto the Monash Freeway into the city. Do this drive a lot, to be honest with you. We're just caught a light, unfortunately, but that's okay. So we'll stop here again. So and stopped. It's a fun little game when you've got a Tesla, just trying to take your foot off the brake just at the right moment to stop this public car. That probably was a little bit close. But yeah, what's been happening with Autopilot in Australia? Obviously, we don't have full self-driving, so can't show that. I'm looking forward to maybe be able to show that soon. Rumours were we'd have it H1 this year. What is it? The 10th of July today, 10th of June, sorry, today. So that means 20 more days. Let's call it 3 weeks. I think that would be optimistic. But as you've seen from a couple of the other videos that I've posted on the channel, they're testing it in Australia, and more specifically, they're testing it in Melbourne, which is where I currently am and where we're driving. So there are cars on the road. This configuration, I've got just a standard rear-wheel drive Model Y with the hardware 4 cameras though. So I actually just got the cusp of that. That was about June last year. I've had the car for about a year, so that's when they switched them over in Australia. And I'm definitely happy I've done that. The hardware 3 cars in the States look to have been left behind a little bit, which is a bit of a shame. So let's get onto the freeway now. Like I said, I do this a lot, so I'm very confident in the ability of the car through here. So, if my hands are to the side or whatever, don't worry, that's just done out of just knowing how the car behaves and how the car reacts. So we'll jump onto the freeway here, and we'll jump right across to that right-hand lane and see if we can get some cars ducking and weaving in front of us as they do in Melbourne. I think just to give you a good demonstration. It might even be some trucks we can sort of move around and get behind. So let's head on over into one of the fast lanes on this right-hand side here and have a chat about Autopilot in Australia on a nighttime drive. Heading across, and we'll get right across into this far right lane. You know, the car does a good job of holding that speed. So 100, there we go, and centers in nicely. So Autopilot in Australia. You can buy full self-driving in Australia. It doesn't do what it does in America. In fact, you would go far as to say it is absolutely not worth it. I think it's $10,100, which is an insane amount of money. And then the enhanced Autopilot, which in Australia gives you things like the car will park itself. The car will navigate for you between entries and exits on highways. I think that there's been some debate as to how good that is. Let's just go the speed limit, because always do, obviously, but we're on the video now, so let's just make sure we're sticking 100 there. So yeah, there's been a lot of activity with Autopilot in Australia, I'd say probably in the last 4 months. Now, there haven't been any announcements or official posts or anything like that, but what I have seen, and what, you know, there's an FSD group going, I think it's on like Tesla Motor Club or something. There's like an old school forum, about 70 pages there. People talking about a lot, and I have experience as well, is that the car is definitely a lot better and smoother at staying in between the lanes when it is on Autopilot. Like I said previously, it might hunt a little bit. It would have been a little bit jerky if cars were moving in, but now it's very, very safe and secure. And like I said, 90% of my driving is done like this when I'm on a highway. You can see why, right? Look, you know, look how perfectly we're on the lane, how we're moving across. But there's been a lot of updates. The smoothness is a lot better. I don't know if they're using, you know, that old legacy system where it was sort of rules based, but you know, it definitely does feel like they've done a lot of work. And I think, from what I've seen with my personal car, you know, I can go into my Eero Wi-Fi router at home and have a look at what the car's been doing. And from about, I think it was about December onwards, there was basically the car was up. I just accidentally stopped there, but we're going to head across this lane. Basically the car was uploading, I think, upwards of 300 gigabytes a month back into the mothership Tesla servers somewhere. And obviously that's, you know, we're seeing the cars being driven on the right-hand drive. They're obviously taking all the data from those cars and building that into models that we've already seen. So quite interesting, really, to think that, you know, some of your personal driving style, you know, for good or for bad, might be in part of these models, and there might be some behaviors that are in there that you might notice. I don't know about that, but it's all they could get it up. But yeah, wild amounts of data. And interesting, that stopped about last month. So in May, it's June now, sort of like towards the end of May. So yeah, look, wild speculation, but I think obviously they've taken all of that data, and then they've, you know, the processing time, I imagine, is pretty severe. And, you know, brand new right-hand drive market, there's going to be a lot of work needed and a lot of processing. So maybe they've taken all the data from the cars that they want to, they've uploaded it, and now they're just crunching through it to try and get a release for FSD in our markets. And look, you know, no guarantee of when it's coming, but there have been a couple of different things that have happened. So there was a story in news.com.au about it was an interview with the managing partner, and said, look here, like, no problems. I'm very happy to let the car drive through here. Absolutely no problems at all. Yeah, there was an article in news.com.au where the managing director of Australia, not sure of his exact title, basically said that there were no regulatory barriers in Australia for the deployment of full self-driving supervised, which is interesting. And I think there'd been a lot of debate as to whether or not these systems were going to be allowed on the roads, because obviously if you look at this, you'd say, well, the car's driving itself, but the way the law works, from my understanding, and here's a good example of these lines not being very clear on this right-hand side, but the car having absolutely no problem. Yeah, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand, there are laws being written in Australia that are going to take a couple of years, but they are to do with like full self-driving unsupervised. Because basically that, you know, when it becomes unsupervised, it becomes a question of who is responsible for what the car is doing. So right now, if we were to be in an accident, you know, or anything were to happen, I am fully responsible for what happens with the car. But the unsupervised is basically, you know, the manufacturer would take responsibility for that. So yeah, that is interesting. So he did say that. There was also, so no regulatory issues. There was also, I think, a post on LinkedIn saying that, you know, the team was hard at work at it. So who exactly knows what that means? But I might leave you here. I'm getting close to where I need to jump off and make some turns. But yeah, quick chat about Autopilot in Australia, and I think I'll test a few different surface roads and things soon. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you.